The following podcast contains spoilers and rude words. Mate, did we watch a thing this week?
Yeah, we did. Hey there, thanks for joining us. It's We Watched a Thing. You know that because you clicked on it. I'm Topher, he's Billy. How are you?
No nonsense here, not this week, buddy.
No,
I'm
just facts. Just the facts, Billy.
I'm good, that's a fact. How are you doing?
I've hatred in my heart, Billy.
Because Super Bowl day?
I've hatred in my heart. Liverpool, well, so on the day we're recording this, Liverpool kind of officially exited the title race. Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. 2020 hasn't stopped.
Hasn't Tom Brady won like 1 million Super Bowls?
Well, yeah, he's famously good at cheating, so sure.
I think you need to slot allegedly into that sentence, mate. I don't want to get us sued.
We actually really don't. There's been sanctions, Billy.
I had some crazy fact today when I was watching, the sports ball. I can't remember the exact figure, so I don't even know why I'm bringing it up. They said something like Tom Brady has played in like 17% of all Super Bowls or something.
Well, you get that when you've been around a long time and you cheat. You know what's great about this? The team that brings me the most misery hasn't even started playing yet this year.
When does Carlton season kick off this year? Is it September still?
No, it ends in September, mate.
That's what I was. Yeah, I know my sports ball.
Famous sports journalist Billy.
My finger is firmly on the pulse. But we're not here to talk about sports this week, are we, mate?
No.
Although there's
this week,
a little bit of sports in this film.
It dabbles, doesn't it?
Yeah, it dabbles in all of the genres, I would argue.
Right.
Yes, we're talking about 2020 American drama film One Night in Miami. It is the first feature film directed by Regina King from a screenplay by Kemp Powers based on his stage play of the same name, and it stars Kingsley Benadir, Eli Gorey, Aldous Hodge, and Leslie Odom Jr.
Reckon he's probably Eli Champ.
I did that. I'm getting really bad at this. I swear I know how to read, but I've been reading Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to my kid, right? Now, Willy Wonka wears a plum-coloured suit,
Sure.
But the way it's written in the book, there's a hyphen between plum and coloured, so I always think that it's one, and I always read it as plume-coloured. I'm like, no, plume ain't a colour, mate.
No.
Eli.
Plumes tend to be colourful.
Yes, they do. Eli.
Is all that staying in?
No, I don't care. You do what you want, mate. And what is it about, Toph?
It is about I'm not sure, actually, to be honest, how fictionalized account of 4 icons of America in the 60s hanging out.
Yeah, the first time I read the description of the film, I misread it and I thought it said, like, completely fictionalized. But then when I read it the second time, it says a fictionalized version of a real night. So I thought it was, like, just entirely made up. And then at the beginning of the film, but the beginning of the film has a kind of, can't remember the exact wording, whether it's based on true events, whatever it says. Yeah, but they slot that on all kinds of crap.
It's like, days. Okay. So yeah, how much of this resembles what happened? No idea. Yeah. But anyway, it's a hangout movie between 4 icons.
It is. It's a hangout movie. It's kind of like a bottle movie. We were talking just recently, last week or the week before, about movies adapted from stage plays and how usually for us they don't entirely land and translate. I just want to call this out as an example of one that does, because I actually think that this worked very, very well as a film, and massive props to Regina King for her directorial debut, because I think this film is directed really, really nicely.
We might be in a bit of an echo chamber this week, I suspect. I think as far as a debut effort goes, this is really solid stuff from King.
It's a very solid film, but it's, and across the board, it starts with a solid foundation. I think the screenplay is really strong. The performances across the board are insanely good. I would watch a biopic just of Leslie Odom Jr. as Sam Cooke. I think that all 4 of the main performances are really great. And then Regina King's direction just nails it. even though, like we said, this is kind of a bottle movie all set in one room, there's no lack of directorial flourish here. And I think what she does with the material actually does elevate it, which is why I think it works as an adaptation.
I think it says a bit that if you were to say to me, hey, do you want to watch a spin-off movie directed by King of a biopic just of any one of these four characters, I'd be like, sign me up.
Absolutely, I agree.
I got to say, I do appreciate the four little intros that they do of the characters before we get into the one night in Miami. That's largely because I have no relationship to Sam Cooke at all.
I had no idea who he was.
At the end of the film, when Leslie Odom Jr. does A Change Is Gonna Come, at that point I'm like, oh, okay, yes, I know this song.
Yeah.
And skipping to that point, that performance is fucking incredible. It's not news to us that dude can sing.
Yeah.
But holy shit, dude can sing.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I knew the words Sam Cooke appeared in that order in the history books, but really I could have told you nothing about Sam Cooke. He's just and I mean you're the same, so maybe it is with our massive sample here of two people. We'll just say that like Sam Cooke probably not a deal in Australia the way he is in America.
Well, that's true. And I mean, again, the sign of a good movie when you watch it and it makes you want to read. So I spent a lot of today reading about these four guys. I don't know if you know about how Sam Cooke died, but he was very young and really weird circumstances around it. And I do wonder if he might have permeated our culture a little more had he lived longer and had more time to do so. But I'm exactly on the same page with you there. In fact, my favorite scene in the film is when he sings The Chain Gang, when Malcolm X is kind of recapping the story of the night they met. There's something about the direction of that scene just really, really got me. It's a really well put together moment, I think, for me.
There's a really good moment in our intro to Jim Brown where we get our first taste hit. I don't know of
small town racism.
Just some very real racism from Beau Bridges.
Yeah, and it's kind of
I'm just throwing Beau Bridges under the bus there. A character played by Beau Bridges.
There's something really shocking about the way that plays out too, because in the back of your mind, you're like, well, yeah, this is the 60s, this is expected. But because of how it's led up to that moment, you actually don't expect it in that fashion. Like,
it's well done.
Yeah, he returns almost like a hero. The woman at the door is like, oh my God, it's this guy. And then, no, you're not allowed in the house. Like, it's really kind of shocking when it hits you like that.
And the fact that, that character, it's a good characterization because he's just like one of those people that if you asked the character played by Beau Bridges, are you a racist?
Yeah.
He'd say, absolutely not.
Yeah. Which is the sign of a racist, usually. Usually it begins with, no, I'm not racist, but.
Yeah, good little scene that. One weird thing about that scene, I just read this when I was just like clicking on, trivia of the film. They mention the season that Brown is coming off, and they put up the real numbers that Brown had that year. But then talks about, I'd give it all back if we could have beaten Green Bay.
Yeah.
They didn't play Green Bay.
Right.
Why get that wrong?
Yeah, see, that's interesting. You'd think more research would have gone into it than that. That's interesting.
Yeah. What are you doing? Is the writer just a Green Bay fan? He's like, I'm just going to change history so that the Packers won the Super Bowl.
There's lots of weird things like that in there. Like, for some reason, for the first half of the film, they call Muhammad Ali Cassius Clay. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, get his name right, people.
Fun fact. I threw Beau Bridges under the bus just earlier. I'll throw my other half under the bus now.
I can see her in the background of the shot staring at the camera.
There's troubles afoot.
Tell the story, though.
The scene at the end of the film where he takes on the name.
Yeah.
That was the moment where she was like, oh. That's who that is. Getting a pretty dark look, just quietly. A lot of people don't follow boxing. It's fair enough.
Totally fair enough. totally fair enough.
I mean, yeah. I suppose I take it for granted that people know who Cassius Clay is, but I'd be wrong. Holy shit, that guy looks like Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
Holy shit. Here's Ali. And okay, you could argue it's teetering over into maybe it's teetering over into impersonation. But regardless, holy shit.
It's less of an impersonation than fucking Malik in Bohemian Rhapsody. We're not at that level. Like,
cool. All right, let's give him an Oscar then. I tell you the
spoiler alert for next week. Fuck Rami Malek.
The strange one for me is Kingsley Ben-Adir as Malcolm X, who for a lot of people, he's the performance of the film, I think. Weirdly, in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, but he doesn't look much like Malcolm X. And then I realize where that comes from is from years and years of wandering the aisles in the video shop.
Yeah.
And Denzel is imprinted in my head as Malcolm X, when in fact, Kingsley Ben-Adir looks a lot more like Malcolm X than Denzel does.
I was just going to bring this up because I know that you watched Did you watch Malcolm X after this?
Yeah, a couple of nights after.
Yeah. So how do you feel now watching that back? Like the comparison between Kingsley Ben-Adir and Denzel, like performance-wise?
Well, they're both
powerhouse performances.
Yeah, to say that they're both high level is an understatement. I mean, Denzel's is an all-timer that's just a genuine embarrassment that Pacino won the Oscar that year for Scent of a Woman, which wouldn't have been an issue if they'd given it to him for Godfather Part 2 in the first place. But and that's a rabbit hole we can go down later.
Oscars be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Denzel's performance in Malcolm X it's an all-timer. It's peak Denzel. It's Denzel going full Denzel before we really knew what that was, maybe.
Yeah. And he also gets a lot more to do in that movie because it covers a lot more. This movie is literally a bottleneck of this one night.
That's right. Kingsley Ben-Adir gets a quarter of a 2-hour film, whereas Denzel got a 3-hour 20 film.
Yeah, and I do think it's amazing the characterization that they get out of these characters over the course of this one night. I can't praise it enough. Like, I love movies like this that are set in a day or a night, like Before Sunrise is one of my all-time favorites. Clerks, classic example. But it's actually really hard to do without wasting time on exposition. And this film doesn't do it. It gets into it and it carries you all the way to the end, completely engaged.
You know what's a lot better in movies than in real life? Boxing.
Yeah, I'm not a boxing fan.
I love boxing in a movie. Like, I'm absolutely sick for a boxing scene in a film.
Yeah. I'm the same with a lot of sports.
So much better than real life.
I'm exactly the same with, like, American football. I don't mind watching American football, but it is so much more entertaining in film. I would way rather watch Friday Night Lights than watch the Super Bowl.
If I'm not mistaken, I didn't fact check this because, I trust my other half. She looked, while we were watching it, she was flicking through IMDb and Aldous Hodge, who plays Jim Brown, was in Friday Night Lights.
No shit.
And I was like, no way, he's too old. And then was like, wait, no. Yeah. No, he's not.
He's not. He's not. We're too old.
We're too old.
It was, oh man. Just yesterday, I was looking up where to buy like wood chips for smoking meat. And one of the first things I found was this meme that said, when a man hits 35, he has to make the decision between becoming a World War II nut or becoming obsessed with smoking various kinds of meat. And I was like, oh my God, I'm that old. I'm that guy now.
You need some hickory chips or the History Channel.
Yes. And it really, really hit me that I'm old.
In fairness, you were a pretty old 16-year-old. So.
I mean, that's completely fair. If anything, I've gotten younger as I've gotten older.
There's an argument for that, actually. It is interesting that in a film, like it said at the beginning, this is 4 American icons of the 60s, 2 of which are played by Americans.
Which two aren't Americans?
Eli is Canadian, and Kingsley is an Englishman.
Huh. I mean, Canadian's close enough, though, innit?
Sure. They do enjoy hearing that.
I should have known that Kingsley was British. That name, Kingsley, it's very fancy.
It's a very fancy name.
It really is.
Like, you're really putting it on a kid, aren't you?
You really are.
First name, Emperor.
Emperor's Lee. Well, I got to say, he holds a pretty great American accent then.
I mean, I thought so, but obviously I'm not going to be as sensitive to it as somebody who holds that accent. So I'm always like, yeah, I mean, I think it's good, but I'm also like, well, I'm not going to say it's good because what do I know? I'm sure there are people that heard Jude Law in Contagion and were like, definitely an Australian.
Oh, man. I forgot that he was pretending to be Australian until I rewatched that about a month ago, and I was like, why? Why? It's just bad. He doesn't say once. Like, he's got it all wrong.
You're doing it wrong, mate. Props to, like you said, most of this film is like a bottle episode. It takes place in a small location. I really quite like the look and the shape, particularly the shape, I think really is what I like most about the lighting in this set.
Yeah.
It doesn't go for, and I think it's right to do so, it doesn't go for too much naturalism. We're looking at 4 icons here. Let's make this shit look cinematic.
Yeah, and it's in a lot of ways, I feel like it's shot more like a stage play. Lots and lots of depth in the light, and and that's where that style of lighting came from. And then Orson Welles came along and said, no, let's light this like a play. Let's get some depth going here. And that's exactly what this plays on. I agree with you. It's beautiful. And I love the set design itself, the look of the room. It doesn't dive too, and it would have been really easy to dive really into, oh, this is the 60s, like just really hamming up the period. It doesn't do that, but you still get that sense from it anyway. It's really nice.
A really good thing that main set does is that it gives King the ability to create division within the space really naturally.
That's right.
Like at any point in time, you can be like, okay, 3 of you there, 1 of you there, and there's actually a physical barrier as well as just space between the characters.
That's
and
right.
So it's a great bit of set design, and it's used really well by King in the direction.
There's that great scene when Cook and Malcolm are really starting to fight and Cook is getting to leave, and the 3 of them are sitting there, and it's a great design because, as you said, it's almost like one big open space, but there's lots of kind of half walls and archways that separate it, and so the 3 of them are sitting on one side and Cook is just on the other side of this arch, and you're right, it creates this beautiful division between them where they don't even need to say anything. You can feel the tension in the room just because there's that physical distance. And it's amazing how huge this room feels.
I wonder if this actually improves the experience of watching the film if you do know more about, and specifically compared to myself, if you know more about Sam Cooke going in. Because you know the date, it tells you at the beginning of the film what day this is. I'm not making that up, am I?
No, you're not. It does. It's like February...
Feb 25, 1964.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so if you know particularly if you know the dates around the deaths of Cook and Malcolm X, it does probably add this extra kind of, layer of melancholy because you know how close you are to the end. That's for these two.
That's right.
Within a year. Two of these 4 characters will be dead.
And really, like, it is an ensemble piece. There are the 4 of them, but I would argue that Cook and Malcolm X are the main 2 characters in the film. I think that's where a lot of the tension is carried from. That's where, Malcolm really, he's already got the other 2 on his side, basically. And there's a bit of tension there when he says he's leaving the Nation of Islam, and Muhammad Ali is a bit like, well, what, you're just using me? But the bulk of the film is made up of Malcolm X trying to convince Sam Cooke that he could be doing more to further the cause. So knowing, and it tells you at the end of the film that Malcolm X dies, what is it, like 2-3 days later, 4 days later or something? It's very, very short after this date.
I thought Malcolm X died at the beginning of 1965.
Right. I just remember it coming up.
I thought, but I stand to be corrected on that.
Okay, so it was like a year later. You're right. He died on the 21st of Feb 1965. Yep. So yeah, it comes up with a title at the end telling you how soon after Malcolm X dies, but it doesn't tell you anything about the future for the other three. So I think you're right. Having that knowledge in your back pocket actually adds something to the film, I think.
The scenes between, and like you said, they are the scenes that kind of have the most juice in the film are when Malcolm X and Sam Cooke are going at it, or when Malcolm X is trying to go at Sam Cooke and Sam Cooke's trying to not be gotten at. This is props to the writing and absolutely props to the performance, because a lot of this, the person who's not speaking is doing a lot in these scenes, because the reason that those kind of little clashes work so well, I think, is that when one is going at the other one knows that the other guy's got a point.
Yes, agreed. And that is where I think this really works well as an adaptation. When you watch a stage play, your eyes have the ability to take in the entire stage. You can look at all the reactions and see how everyone else on stage is reacting to whatever the speaker is saying. Whereas in film, obviously, those choices are made for you by the director and the editor as to what you look at. And if those choices don't land, then that's it, unfortunately. But you're right, here it really does a great job of giving you those little moments. The editing, I think, is really tight in this film.
Something that I think would be interesting to focus on if you were to rewatch this film, because I think this is something that Regina King, maybe this is the thing that I think she does best in the direction of this film, is that at the beginning of every scene, you know whose scene it is. You know who you kind of, like, who am I with in this? You can't just be with one of them.
Yeah.
Well, or at least certainly that's not how it plays out. It certainly does not play out that you're with one person for the runtime of this film. It shifts scene to scene, and you're subconsciously aware of that as the viewer. Now, how Regina King did that, I don't know. But it occurred to me 3/4 of the way through the film that, and I think it was when I was watching the scene between Jim Brown and Malcolm X, where Brown kind of takes him to task a little bit. And I was like, how do I know that this is Jim Brown's scene?
Yeah.
I don't know how she did it. I'd be really interested to watch it again to be like, what are the little things she did at the beginning of a scene to set you up for that? It's pretty masterfully done.
You're right, yeah. And it's probably just as something as simple as the shot that the scene establishes with. But however she does it, for a first-time director, I just think this is such an impressive effort. And she didn't get nominated for director for the Globes, did she? I don't believe she was one of them.
Yeah, well, must be upsetting to not be nominated when Jared Leto is at an awards ceremony. More on that next week.
Fucking Leto. I mean, we'll get into this like in about 20 minutes when we record that one, but I honestly don't know who's worse out of Leto and Malik. I'll tell you who's better than both of them, though. Regina King.
Is it everyone in this film?
Yeah. I mean, speaking of awards, you would have to guess that this film has some Oscar potential. I don't think it got any Globe nominations, but I mean, fuck the Hollywood Foreign Press. If you had to pick where you think this is going to be placed, what would your picks be for nominations?
It's a tough one, because I think that I should double check this, but I think that Leslie Odom Jr. got a SAG nomination for supporting.
Yep.
I think. And I suppose that's the difficulty with the performances in this film, is that to do it without category fraud, you're pushing 4 people in the one category.
Yeah, and
because there isn't a lead.
No.
This is a 4-way story. If you were going to rank it, Jim Brown is 4th.
You would probably have, if they were going to run 2 of them, they would probably put Malcolm X in lead and Leslie Odom Jr. in supporting. And even that as you say, that would still be category fraud, I think.
It would be. It would be. Okay, so who would you, if we put up more than one person, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot, because you'll be splitting the vote.
Yeah.
So if you're going to put up one person, who's your pick?
If I was going one, it would be Leslie Odom Jr. in supporting, because I think supporting is going to be a smaller race. I think that, I mean, it's so hard to say this year, and I mean, the fact that Leto got nominated shows you that there haven't been many great supporting performances that stuck in people's mind this year. So that's why I think I would go for supporting, and I'd probably go Leslie Odom Jr. if I was doing it.
I'd probably lean Kingsley Benadir, but I mean, you just throw a blanket across the performances.
Yeah.
They're all excellent. Like we said, the Jim Brown role is probably gets the least of the four of them, but in some ways, that is a shame because he is spectacular.
Yeah. I would definitely be pushing Kemp Powers for adapted screenplay, though, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of competition there.
That seems like a lock for a nomination, doesn't it?
Has to be. And I would definitely have Regina King up for directing, and I'm not convinced she'd win it, but I feel like she definitely deserves to be in the conversation here. All right. How are you scoring this?
Strong 7 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm exactly the same. I'm a very strong 7. I was nearly an 8, but I think a 7 is,
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where the choice is clearly between a 7 and an 8, not a 7 and a 6.
Yep, exactly. Yep, highly recommended. All right, what are we getting to next week, buddy?
Do you know Cassius Clay is Muhammad Ali?
What? What?
True story.
I don't think that. I'm going to have to message your partner and double check that, because I know that she would know.
Yeah, should then throw something at me. What did you ask what we're doing next week?
I did.
Look, we're in for a treat.
Oh, absolute treat.
I can say, having already seen the film, that we're doing The Little Things.
Yes, we are. The Little Things.
Yeah, origin story of Peter Baelish.
My first note I wrote down when watching it was, is this movie about Shia LaBeouf? All right. That'll be fun. Can't wait to get to that. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that at wewatchedathing.com or wewatchedathing@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle @wewatchedathing. If you want to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/wewatchedathing, and we'll catch you next week.
Watch a movie, folks.